So what I liked about the session today was a really good kind of contrast between what Cecile was saying at the start around where we are in Australia, the merit that we have, the great ag, the great potential for our food industry, to then kind of go into the food service side of things. And what we're talking about today is that other key channel that Cecile spoke about, the retail side of things. So really what we're going to talk about kind of touches base on what you were talking about before. As much as we talk about getting range into retail, it's not just a sales conversation. It's not just getting your sales team on the ground, giving them a kick, here's a product, go and sell, right? It is this combination between getting the business stuff right, the operational stuff right, and as well as the sales side. So that's really what we're going to have a chat about today. My background is engineering and manufacturing, so I'm the ops guy. Yay, super sexy, stock control and pricing and stuff like that. Versus Mia, I'll let you introduce yourself from the sales side of things as well.
Yeah, so I've been in retail sales for 21 years now already, so that makes me officially 25 years old. Oh, sorry. I've grown up in the space. I left school and I landed up in retail. My family would argue that I was selling at the age of 6. So I know the industry. And before we even start, I just want to say you could have the best business mind in the world. You could understand business 100%. But when it comes to retail, and I'm sure you will agree with me, when it comes to buyers, it is absolutely nonsensical. There is no rhyme or reason to any decision that anybody is going to make. Your margins are not going to make sense, and I can bash you till you're blue in the face, and they're still not going to make sense. But it is a conversation that you have to have. So if things don't make sense today, just put your hand up, because you won't be the first person that says you're confused about retail. You won't be the last person. And hopefully we can just kind of unravel a few things around retail for you. So that's my background.
So we're going to have a couple of kind of key points. Chime in as we go through. Obviously, Mia and I are going to tag team, so if you've got any questions that you want to ask, just ask them. But I'm going to make 2 key assumptions today before we jump in. Number 1 is around your product. If you're a foodpreneur, or pick a buzzword, you don't have a product, or it's a piece of vaporware, you're probably a fair while off from being retail ready. So we're going to assume that you've got a product, you're 90% there. You're kind of going, hey, I've heard about this thing called food services, or I've heard about this thing of how difficult Amazon is, or how great Amazon is. Now, what's this channel about being retail? So that's my first assumption, that you've kind of got a product. And the second one is what we're going to talk about today from a retail perspective is not your Coles and Woolworths. That's a kind of a very different beast. We're going to talk about more your independent retailers, like your specialist kind of area. The reason why we do that is, what was it, 4 days ago, the CEO of Woolworths walked out of the Four Corners, right? So we all quite know that Coles and Woolworths is a very different industry than talking about these people like Harris Farms and Flannery's and things like that. So that's just 2 kind of context setters for today. But really what I want to kind of talk about is a couple of key questions that we get from working with our food manufacturers. And like you said, Sean, to set those expectations. Just because you've engaged a distributor or you've engaged a sales team, it's not overnight that you're going to get success. It's kind of telling them there's actually a bit of a process, and it's a bit of a system that we work through. Hence the sales and operational kind of thing. So I'm going to go first from an operations perspective. Talking about how long it takes to get into retail is all about your readiness. I think you mentioned about pricing and quality and things like that. Do you have the right documentation in place? Do you have a really sleek looking brochure which tells why you're different than the other bacon provider? Do you have a great price list that actually works for you as well as a retailer? Do you have the other back of office mechanisms? Do you have simple things like a phone line where a retailer can contact you? There's some of the really different, interesting things that people don't think about when they just think, I'm just going to walk into an IGA and sell my kombucha. There's a stack of readiness things that you need to get going in the background, let alone just talk to stores. So, from a sales perspective.
Yeah, from a sales perspective, how long does it take to get into retail? How long is a piece of string? It could take, if you're actively in store, and the big thing is you have to be in front of retail all the time. You've got to be going back and visiting stores. Some of them are independent and they can make their own decision and they will carry the account, and that's okay. That could still take 3, 6, 7, 8 weeks before it's going to happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is you may have to go through the buying groups. Now that could take 3 months, it could take 6 months, it could take 12 months. It could depend on when the ranging review is coming in. So you can't just say to yourself, I'm going to invest in a salesperson and they're going to give me results immediately. It's not going to happen. Nothing I can say today is going to make any of you love sales. I have no Jedi mind tricks that are going to go, ooh, you love sales. You mentioned it, it's hard. You've got to be out there all the time. So if you're thinking about getting a sales rep, that's great. But if you don't have certain things in place, if you don't have rangings in place, if you haven't got your marketing in place that's getting it out to people via certain social media channels, buyers are looking through these social media channels themselves. They're looking for these products. They're looking for what's new and fresh. They're going through trade magazines to see what is the new it product that's coming through. And you should be doing exactly the same. So that by the time you walk through the door and you're having a conversation, there's a tiny little bit of awareness. And if there's no awareness about your brand, there's awareness about your product. The other thing you have to take into account is that you're going into a store and you're asking them to give you a facing that another brand that's already doing either well or relatively well, or at the very least their sales going through, you're asking them to take a punt on you and they know nothing about you. It takes time, and you need to put the time in when it comes to sales. There's no quick turnaround here. We have really good relationships with a lot of retail stores. It can still take up to 6 weeks for them to go, I'm going to take a punt. All right, let's go. Let's bring it in. It's not instantaneous. So take the time, plant the seeds, and plant the seeds today, because sometimes it's only going to pay off in 12 months' time.
And that's a really interesting reflection. We've had some experiences working with really excited food brands. How do I say that? You know, COVID has done wonders for people to jump in and take the leap themselves. They've done a really magical spreadsheet which says, hey, I'm going to be a millionaire in a couple of years' time. But what they don't take into account is the effort and the time taken to kind of build these relationships with these stores. That's why a lot of the time that we work with it, we would encourage you to get into food services. We would encourage you to have an e-commerce store. We would encourage a couple of different channels so you can start building some of these things in the interim. Rather than going, I'm going to get into Costco and this is going to be my entire business model. Well, they might not know you. Or you're rebranding, you're repositioning yourself in the market. So the question around how long it takes, let's be realistic, it's months, not weeks. Would you agree, Sean?
Or not at all.
Yeah, or not at all.
Or not at all.
Could be 12 months without a result.
Yep. And it's the tenacity, just to be around and be present, like you were saying. So the second big question we get is...
Does anybody have a question on that? Does anybody have a question on how long it takes? Or...
So the second question is, what do buyers look for? Did you want to make a start with that?
Oh, yes.
I get to throw you on the deep end, right? Because that's what friends are for.
Oh, God. If you want to meet the most egotistical person who likes to play God and thinks they have control over the world, I'd like to introduce you to a buyer. It doesn't matter which buyer it is, doesn't matter which group they buy from, they all fall in that world, and unfortunately you just have to play the game with them and let them have their little, well, not their little huge egos. But they look for specific things. As I said, they're already looking around to see what products are out there. They're looking for margin, right? Remember I said to you at the beginning, retail makes no sense. You could be making 30% margin, and now you have to explain to your business partners or your investors why a retail gets to make 48% or 50% or 52%, depending on the category you're in. Right? It doesn't make sense. So they're looking for margin. They're looking for capacity, to your point. If it goes well, so for example, we just did a ranging into Woolworths for a popcorn brand, and before anything, they needed to come do a site inspection and they needed to see what the capacity actually was. Because if they turned on tomorrow, just the first order was 8 times more than what the factory was used to, right? And now we're sitting at, within the first 3 months, we were sitting at $4 million worth of sales just through Woolworths itself. So they do look for that capacity. And then they look for some of the boring stuff. They're looking for barcodes. They're looking to make sure that all your specifications are correct. In the past, You would throw money at them to do promotions. By the way, you still do that now, right? But they would then actively do other promotions other than just on the shelf. Today, the expectation is they want to see what you're going to do to support your brand. How are you going to drive feet into their store to buy your brand? So when you're doing a pitch deck, make sure to include what your marketing plan looks like. Are you throwing marketing dollars behind your product, yes or no? And if you're not, well, that's fine, you're not throwing it, but what is your marketing channel doing? These are just some of the things buyers are looking for, and you just got to wrap your head around the fact that it's going to take you time to sit in front of a buyer, and a buyer is going to be incredibly distracted when you're sitting in front of them, and they might only give you 10 or 15 minutes, but you've got to hit those points. The other thing a buyer is going to look for is when they look at that recommended retail price, they're also going to look at margins. But you need to be very clear with your price because there's a lot of hidden rebates. It's all over the news at the moment. There's a whole lot of hidden rebates, discounts that are going to sit in there at the same time. So you need to make sure that all of that's in place before you even sit down with the buyer. And if any of you are questioning what you've seen on the news with Woolworths and Coles and what's happening there, I had a conversation 2 weeks ago when all hell broke loose with the Woolworths buyer that if I had pressed record on that conversation and had released it out to the press, we're done. Everything that they were denying happened in that one conversation. It is out there. Protect yourselves. Make sure your pricing is right.
And I'll probably add 2 bits to that. Number one is the last thing you want to do is get a buyer excited, get all the way through the journey, and then not be able to deliver. So the capacity side of things is not just, oh, we'll wing it. If they place an order, they want to be able to get it delivered sharpish. So it's that speed to market, let alone do you have the volume to be able to keep up with that, and the quality and things like that. So it's taking this extended supply chain view. It's not just your factory can produce 10 widgets an hour. Can your suppliers, can your ingredients people kind of keep up as well? If you get that big order, you know, there's no point getting an order if your suppliers are going to take 8 weeks to deliver your ingredients and things like that. So that's point number one, and I think you alluded to it as well, is a lot of these retailers are getting a little bit lazy in terms of their branding and their awareness and marketing. So the first thing they're probably going to do is Instagram you, right, or Google you. So if you don't have a presence, they're probably not going to engage in it. You have the best product in the world. I think there was a talk I once saw which really denounced the idea of don't sell on taste, because everybody says they've got the best baker in the world. Everybody says they've got the tastiest kombucha, right? That's not a selling point. You need to be able to walk in with good pricing, good presence and things like that. And then the sweetener is the taste and the samples and things like that.
Can I just add to that, to your point, Pete? The fastest way I piss off any brand I speak to, and I do it with love in my heart and all respect, I'm sure your product tastes great. You wouldn't be doing it if it didn't taste great. It's not like you're coming in here and saying, hey, taste this, I don't know, whatever.
The Cadbury Vegemite?
Yeah, taste this Vegemite, it tastes like toilet water. Of course it's going to taste great. Don't care. Tell me how much money I'm going to make and how many units I'm going to sell through. That's the bottom line, right? So for brands who keep on going in and having the conversation, and we generally walk away from those brands where they say to us, but it's the best tasting product. Well, if that's all you've got going for you, you have nothing going for you. So let's move on, because 90% of the population of this world will tell you Vegemite is the worst tasting thing in the world. We're not selling it on taste. We're selling it on the brand awareness of the excitement it engenders in Australia, the fact that our kids are, teethed, when they're teething, we're giving them Vegemite on a biscuit, right? But 90% of the world hate this stuff. Taste does not play into your marketing conversation and your promotion conversation. We assume your product tastes good. Oh, and by the way, it has to look good. Did I say that? Buyers want to see a product that really looks good. Otherwise, they're just not interested either. It's got to stand out on shelf. If you're going into a heavily saturated category too, make sure your product is standing out on shelf. Otherwise, you just become part of the noise, and it's very unlikely that whatever product you've got, you're the only product on shelf. there's going to be 4 or 5 brands sitting next to you. Make sure you're standing out so people can actually see it and are encouraged to take it off the shelf and have a look and read it. So yeah.
I mean, have a think about, say, the Unilevers of the world. They'll traditionally change their packaging probably every 6 to 9 months. You know, we've probably all seen the little tags that, hey, my shampoo used to look like this. That's obviously the high end, let alone us trying to get into to market in the first place. It's got to look good. So, any questions about buyers?
Yeah, one, can take manufacturers suppliers a long time to actually manufacture their goods or have it ready and prepared. What sort of guarantees, contracts, documentation required or available, I should say, that can be struck for the manufacturer's protection that buyers will continue to buy at a certain rate?
Zero.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no guarantee, but if you get into the majors, they will range you for a period of time depending on the negotiation you make. So it could be between 6 and 12 months, depending on when they do their range reviews. It is your responsibility to make sure that that product moves off the shelf. They're giving you the platform to do it. Yeah, I'm making fun of the fact that they've got all these rebates, these discounts, and you know, oh God, why do they make so much money? And us as brands make so little money. They've got the facility, they've got the feet, they've got millions of feet coming through their store every month, right? So you still have a level of responsibility. If you continue to move off shelf, there's no reason for them to get rid of you. But if you start becoming out of stock, if you get lackadaisical about your marketing, if your product is not up to scratch, the consumer is going to do what they do best. They're going to move their money somewhere else. The minute they start moving their money somewhere else, you're dead in the water. How do you know that they're moving their money somewhere else? If you're with the majors, you get scanned data. You can get scanned data from them weekly. And if you start to see that dip, you know you're in trouble. And you can almost forecast to the ranging conversation where they're going to boot you up. There's no reason to boot out a product that is performed. So that didn't answer your question, but...
Yeah. And I think that as much as you might get ranged in, say, Metcash or Foodworks or some of these kind of tier 2, they're giving you the platform to say, come and access my 900 stores. But the onus is up to the manufacturer to go, oh, this particular store has ordered for 8 weeks, I should pick up the phone and kind of re-engage that order. That's the best thing we can do around that.
Arranging, unless you're going into like Coles or Woolworths or a Costco, arranging means nothing. All they've done is open the door for you. You still have to walk through the door. You've still got to go in there and negotiate with the store. So it's up to you. But at the end of the day, the answer to your question is, how is my product performing on shelf? If it's performing well, then I'm guaranteed at least 6 to 12 months. If it's not performing well, I've got to do something to change that.
You also mentioned about the buying groups as well, and there are lots of those groups that basically becomes like another filter in the process to range.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, there's a couple of ways to do things. So if you have the margin and you're a small business, and I just want to be clear, you have to have the margin to do this. You go to Sean and a distributor and you go, just deal with that for me, because that is a headache I don't want to even start with. Because with a well-established business, they probably have terms, a distributor will have terms that are not available today. So they'll go, yeah, great, we'll take that. If you don't have margin, and when you're starting up, a lot of people don't actually have margin when they're starting up. They don't have the ability to sacrifice 30% straight off the bat to give to a distributor, and then they're still going to give, you know, from that point 40% or whatever the category is asking for still needs to go through them. So if you get into a buying group, the buying group itself, so for example, if we talk about a Ritchie's will negotiate with you depending on the category. They could negotiate 12-15%. But then they could still say to you, I don't want you to deliver it through store, I actually want you to deliver through the Metcash network. They don't actually ask you that, so, but just for example, if they did. And then there's another 3 or 6% or 7% you've got to sacrifice there. So that's why you've got to be really across what your numbers look like. And anytime you go to a buying group, what are you getting from the buying group? You're getting one negotiation that's going to access 70 stores or 80 stores. Depending on your product, not all those stores are the right stores for you, and you've got to be very clear about that, because sometimes you'll do a big ranging, but only 20 of the 150 stores are actually your stores. So you get access to the buying power of all those stores. But again, you're going to make sure your product performs, and you've got to go cut in. It's still your responsibility to go to store, speak to the grocery manager or fridge or whoever you're talking to, and you're going to go negotiate the space, and then you've got to ask them, pretty please, your range, can you clear up space for me, whatever it looks like. It's not an automatic success factor, but every buying group you speak to, every piece on the way tends to take a chunk. So if you've got a lot of margin and you don't have a lot of manpower, head off to a distributor, let them deal with that headache for you. But if you don't have margin, you have to go the other way.
And then it kind of boils back to the question I raised at the start. If you need to go direct to store yourself, do you have the margin to be able to use cold chain logistics? Yeah, that takes 17, 22%. Or are you ambient? Do you need a 3PL? Then there's other complications around that as well. So it's not just as simple as going, I want to go to retail and I'm going to do this. There's variations that we really just want to take this session to kind of say this is some factors to consider as well. Any other questions on the buyers?
Just one.
Yeah.
I haven't been watching the news. What's going on with Tubbergh Woolworths?
It's just the conversation again about the fact that they're making so much margin, they're making so much profits, but when you look at the pull through on the brands, what are the brands making? What are they sacrificing to be on shelf? And every time someone goes on promotion, Woolworths is not, out of the goodness of their heart, they're not giving up 10%, they're coming to us. And they're asking us to give up 10%, and then if we give up 10%, they will do the pleasure of letting the consumer know that they're 10% cheaper, but they didn't give anything. One of the great things actually about working with a distributor though, is you can actually negotiate with the distributor. If you've got a really good brand, you can negotiate with the distributor to say, I'll give 10%, will you match me? And some distributors, I don't know if you do that, some distributors will match that. And then you kind of go, okay, I'm okay with doing that because I feel like they're feeling the pain with me. But when it comes to a Coles and Woolworths, we're going to put you on half price, but you're going to give it to us on half price, and then we'll put it. So they lose nothing by being on half price, whereas brands, we lose everything. Consumer, they're losing everything.
I might just, go back. So that kind of neatly goes into a couple other problems that we traditionally see, not just from about, say, how long does it take or what do we need to look for and things like that. We also see some problems around the manufacturers themselves. I think we've got a conversation after this around compliance and HACCP. We once worked with a client who was probably 11th hour to get range into Paris Farm. It was a beautiful organic soup product. Very original, very earthy, fantastic story. Almost ready to sign the paperwork. They turned around and said, oh, can you show us your HACCP and food safety documents? How do you spell HACCP? I'm like, are you kidding? Right, so there's a couple of things that you might just need to think about from the back office side of things. Do you have your logistics in place? I think we mentioned that. Do you have your food safety? Do you have that traceability side of things? I think I saw someone outside who does some traceability things. Again, the buyers, yes, they want to be able to get you on shelf and they've got to make money, they've got targets, of course, but they also don't want to look like numpties, so if there's a recall or something like that, what's the risk side of things from a retailer perspective as well that we need to consider. Other bits I think we've mentioned around kind of the brand awareness side of things and just not having enough of that. I'll put my hand up and go, I'm a social media person, I don't like Instagram, but for my brands, and the people we work with, it's terribly important. I think we've all done that. We've come across a great brand. You pick out your phone, and if you're not there, or if your website looks a bit naff, and then you've got a Facebook but you don't have Instagram, you kind of don't get confidence in the brand. And of course, if the consumer's not getting confidence, the buyer's not going to get confidence and things like that. So, and you don't need to spend a fortune, or sometimes you do need to spend a fortune. Just depends on obviously where you want to position yourself. And from a sales side, what do you normally come across in terms of some other problems?
What do I come across? I think I've spoken a lot about what we've come across from a sales perspective. I probably have hundreds of things, I can't think of anything. But it does tend to be pretty much what we've discussed already. It's not an easy world to be in. Taste is not the factor.
And I think just to kind of close up the conversation, the idea that you're getting on shelf means that somebody else is coming off shelf. You know, I think we're all very familiar with better the devil you know. The buyers are the same thing. Unless what you're taking out is so poorly performing that it's a no-brainer, it is easy for them to go, okay, I'll just keep on placing that monthly order to, you know, the same barbecue sauce provider. So there is that psychology that if you're putting two facings on shelf, a competitor who might have sales reps on the ground, might be having a similar conversation, keeping and defending their brand, you've got to kind of kick them off shelf. So that's really some kind of, you know, branding philosophy that manufacturers sometimes don't get their head around. You know, they're great at producing products, but the hardcore question about getting on shelf is you're kicking somebody else off.
And I think Sean addressed it. It's the consistency. You've got to be in store all the time. Sales reps, I know I'm one of them, we're a bit sneaky. If we see that you're out of stock or your shelves are low, believe me when I tell you I'm taking your space and I'm moving all the tickets around so that when the reorder comes through, whoever's doing the reorder doesn't realise that I'm not supposed to have so much space. And slowly, I'm pushing other people off that shelf. So you have to have consistency. You've got to be in the store all the time. So one of the questions we do have is, when do I work with a distributor and when can I go direct? So if you've got plenty of margin and you can afford to sacrifice that margin and you do not want the headache of everything we've just spoken about, the distributor's the way to go. 100%. Look for a really good distributor and move on your merry way and just give them stock and walk away. If you are precious about your brand and you want the relationships and you don't have the margin and you're in a position to deliver, because sometimes you might not have the margin to give it to a distributor, but you actually don't have the capacity or the capability to even deliver products, well, nobody has to tell you anything. You have to work with a distributor. So the big popcorn brand I was talking to you about, we don't have the margin to work with a distributor, but we do not have the capability to deliver to 900 stores across Australia. We have no choice but to work with a distributor to do that for us. So if you're very precious about your brand, you want the relationship with the stores, you don't have the margin, and you're able to deliver, then you should do it by yourself. You know, it's until you get that margin, until you get into a position where you can say, you know what, I'm quite happy I can hand it over to a distributor, or, do you know what, now's the time for me to get a salesperson. So that's kind of the equation that we look at. Yep.
Any questions?
Yep, all good.
Great. Well, we're like Alex said, we're out in the middle. Look for the big Elm banner. Love to have a chat to you about retail and sales teams and things like that. Thank you very much, everyone.